for those of you at the table and online, we actually have some time scheduled now to do something a little different, which is we're going to have a little bit of a delegate roundtable discussion. And this is basically our chance to talk about something that is not Juniper or any of the other companies. What we're going to talk about is basically a career in wireless and what it's like to be a wireless engineer. Blake suggested this topic, and others, I think, chimed in and thought that this would be a good topic because, frankly, this is a great industry, and there are a lot of people getting involved in it, but not enough people because every company is looking for more, wireless engineers. If you guys are watching this and thinking, "Wow, that looks way better than my job,"
they're right.
They're right. And this would be a great opportunity for you to hear what it is that you need to do to not necessarily get to this table, which you may do, but more importantly to have the kind of jobs and do the kind of work that these folks are doing. So that's what we're going to talk about next. You guys are welcome to sit in and listen and hear what we have to say. Blake, do you want to introduce this a little bit and talk about a little bit of the background here on what you wanted to, where do you want this to go?
Well, the discussion came up because all of us, like you mentioned, we struggle finding good engineers to be able to join our teams. It's Sam and I and Jen, we've all had this discussion before in the past. Is how do we create new engineers? How do we bring up the next talent? Because we're not getting any younger, and eventually we want to be off the field and be overseeing engineers that are doing the work, and we're just kind of looking at it from the high levels and giving somebody else some knowledge. So the discussion that we were talking about is just how do we get more people involved in wireless? Because you look around this table, and even from the delegate story, it really is, we're a close family almost. Sam and I compete, but then the next day, Sam's asking me to help out him on work. We all have to make this work if we want to be in jobs and have jobs still. Bruce Alexander, I remember him from aerospace and Cisco days, and then when we came to Juniper last time, it was just like, oh, hi Bruce, what are you doing over here now? And we have to make this work, so it doesn't matter if you're Juniper, if you're Aerohive, if you're Meraki, if you're whoever. RF is RF, and learning that RF is what's tricky. We all know and we all say it. Keith, you mentioned this many a times in your stress test. Why can't we just go to Best Buy and buy a Linksys access point? Why isn't that going to do the job for an enterprise campus like this size that we're sitting in right now? And I just want to say is, what do we need to do to help get more engineers into our market? What does it take? What does it require? It requires us being mentors and leaders, but what does that really mean? Somebody that wants to start in this business, how do they do that? What was your starting points in this? And Stephen made a great comment last night. Anybody can call themselves an expert. You can say that you're an expert at it, but you have to be able to back that up as well. So I'll open it up to whoever. How did you guys get started in this business? And I'm really curious to George, not put you on the spot there, but you're in a different space than a lot of us. You're in the customer. You're the one that's buying this, and you're the one that's out there actually deploying it on your own at times. You may not involve the partners as much, but a lot of us are just partners. But how did you decide to go into the customer end, and what's keeping you in the customer end and not coming into a more of a partner role?
Well, previous to this, I did work for a partner, Cisco partner, and so I had that exposure and experience, which was fun. My ultimate goal was to so let me step back. So from a partner perspective, you go in, you kind of do high-level design, you do implementation, and then you leave. And then you repeat that process. So I wanted to have the whole gamut. I became extremely well at that process, managing the project, getting it installed, understanding what I needed to do to satisfy the customer. But the back-end troubleshooting, the routing and switch, I didn't have a lot of that exposure. So I took the leap from a partner to the end user, to the buying side, and it's probably one of the best things I've ever done. It actually filled in a lot of the gaps that I had, that I was missing, because I just knew this portion. I didn't know the big picture. And for me, wireless, it was a crapshoot, and it really panned out. I always said about 5-10 years ago, IT had a help desk. They had the server guy. They had the route and switch guy. They didn't have the wireless guy. They do now. Larger enterprises are looking for wireless expertise. And then the mentorship. Being mentored, sitting in this man's class a number of years ago and seeing what wireless was about. Being mentored by the likes of Sean Jackman, working with Sean for a number of years. You start to see the bigger picture. Interacting with Bruce on a project in Ohio. You start to see, the man who wrote the book for Survey and start to ask inquisitive questions.
So is wireless a small enough community that you really can run into people like Bruce and Keith and so on?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. So somebody new wanting to get into this, I mean, they don't have to say, oh, I'd never get a chance to. They will.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
Yesterday we talked. Do you want to tell them about how you're growing your own today?
Yeah, so it's difficult, right? When you're trying to find wireless expertise and not somebody that knows how to configure a box. I mean, face it, there's best design documents. You can read that and pretty much get your way through it. But to understand the whole gamut, understand layer 1, layer 2, it's very difficult to find that person. So what we've done at the hospital system is we've looked for internal resources to groom. And we've been very, very successful. We have a few folks on our staff that are excelling, that have far exceeded my expectations. And right now I'd probably put them against any other hospital system's IT from a wireless perspective. They can easily go in and look at layer 1 and layer 2 and make their own decisions. But there's a invested approach to that. You literally have to spend time and educate, not just hand the ball off and say, figure it out. And it makes them more valuable, allows them to appreciate their job a little bit more. And frankly, overall, not only are you benefiting the organization, but you're providing someone effectively a new lifestyle, right? They're making more money.
Aren't you risking vendor lock-in though when you do that, right? You're going to go and you're going to learn about whatever solution we have deployed at our enterprise, and you're going to groom somebody on that one particular platform as opposed to maybe stepping back and taking a more vendor agnostic approach to RF fundamentals, things along those lines. Isn't there a risk in doing that?
Yeah, I mean there's a risk, but understanding that when you start to talk about Wi-Fi, RF is RF. When you start to talk about 802.11, it's 802.11. And then now you have the different blocks, right? You have the different vendor approaches. But generally, they're all doing the same.
Yeah.
We're here at Juniper. They have a virtual controller. They're doing distributed access. They might be doing it, and they are doing it a little bit differently than everyone else. And everyone else is doing it a little bit different from all the other vendors. So, but you have to give somebody the lead-in to first get the fundamentals down. And then from there, you've opened up a can of worms for them to kind of venture where they want to go.
Yeah.
The bigger struggle that I've found, and I think we see this in some of the folks that we talk to, is folks that start off at RF or start in wireless and don't have the wired background.
Struggle.
They struggle, right? So, to me, a lot of times I find folks that have the wired background and they migrate into wireless, they get the picture quicker.
So, what is your criteria for choosing who you're going to put into this new kind of training path role thing? Because I've had no success with it.
Curiosity.
I'll pick people, and if you ask someone, are you interested in learning wireless? The answer is always yes, until they start learning it and see, oh, this is hard.
Well, I think that's
All of
the
a sudden,
key.
I'm not interested anymore.
It's motivation.
So how are
right?
you
Self-driven.
picking
Yeah.
people? Like, what are you using to decide who's really self-driven and who's just saying they're self-driven because they don't want to be on help desk anymore?
Well, it's funny you say that, and I hope that the folks over at the hospital system are watching. We actually do a mentor program, and the mentor program is pretty much by my design. It was folks from help desk, folks from desktop that wanted to learn more. And you kind of put them through their paces. So for example, with our help test folks, we meet every Friday morning for about 4 hours. We just go through basics. And we lose some people along the way, right? So we know that maybe that's not for them. But the folks that stick around, that are hungry, that are taking home the switches at night, the best thing to do is to have your own lab.
Yes.
And when I have a help desk guy that says, can I borrow the switch? Absolutely. Bring it home. And then you get those emails 2 o'clock in the morning. Hey, I'm having a problem. That's the guy that I know that is going to make the cut
Or he scheduled an email to.
Or that too.
He's
Yeah.
figured out your system.
I want to run a visual just right now. How many people in the room here have a home lab?
Home lab. Even I have
Everybody
a home
watching at home, look at that. That should be a first thing. If you don't have a lab, what are you doing?
We've hit on it many a times in numerous podcast episodes that you cannot be successful in this if you don't put the effort forward. I always ask anybody that I'm interviewing, and I've been notorious lately with going through interviews, and I've only accepted 2 people, and I've interviewed a couple dozen, and only 2 have made it through. And one of the questions that always gets me is that when I ask them, why don't you, I know certifications, we all have different takes on whether or not certifications are valuable or not, but when you're starting, if you don't go out there and put the effort to learn it, go through the CWNA, CWEPs, etc., and go through all those tests, if you're not self-driven to do that for yourself, if you're waiting for a company to tell you what certification to take, you're not going to make it. And I'd wager that you're not going to make it in any technology.
I think that it's a point that Sam mentioned earlier regarding vendor lock-in. We all know the CWNP, but I think it's, personally I rate it above any vendor's wireless certification.
It's fundamentals.
That was all there was for a
And
period
I
of
think,
time there.
and maybe not so much in the US, but probably in the UK, Australia, and elsewhere, the CWNP is barely known. Rarely do you ever see a job advertised that even mentions it, and even wireless guys that play a bit don't know. A lot of them don't know the CWNP. So if someone's going and doing a CWNA off their own back, that's a big indicator for me that they're interested in wireless.
They're motivated.
As
They
opposed to
want
just
to
doing a
learn
vendor
this.
specific because obviously doing a vendor specific is going to help them more with employment. The CWNA, certainly where I'm coming from, it's not going to help you. It's going to help you a lot, but not so much for employment in the short term. In the longer term, it certainly will.
Yeah.
So
And
let me turn it around. So somebody watching this, somewhere out there's a guy who's saying, I want to get in this career. And this happens a lot. I'll get a lot of people come up to me and they'll say, how do I get started? How do I get into this? So you've talked about, kind of what you need. So nuts and bolts. How does this guy get himself a lab? How does he get himself going, learning? How does he get himself hooked up with somebody who can mentor him? How does he, get started in the certification track? I mean, maybe it's, a help desk person. Maybe it's even a storage person. Hey now. How do they get started? What is
Twitter
it?
and blogs.
Yeah, Twitter. Yeah, so start with
Okay,
Twitter.
so start with Twitter.
Every single person, every single delegate here is reachable by Twitter, and I think we would all, as a community, reach out and help anybody who's asking. But listen to podcasts when you're out jogging in the morning or
Which
driving to
podcast?
work. Of course, the No Strings Attached show.
And the Wireless Land Professionals.
And the Wireless Land
Keith.
Professionals one, yeah, of course. There's plenty of stuff that you can do to just immerse yourself in the technology. You've likely got wireless at home. Take some of the things that you listen to from the podcast. Fire up Wireshark, that's free for download, and look at packets. Start and see what you've got running in your own environment. You don't have to spend a lot of money. Reach out to people. Be social.
Yeah, you don't need $1,000 brand X access point to troubleshoot and learn about PMKs and how the WPA passphrases processes happen. That's on any Soho brand router that you can pick up at Best Buy, Fry's, or wherever.
And you can pick up old enterprise gear on eBay cheap.
Yeah.
And now
I
if
think
you can get a virtual controller now, you can.
the key is to getting yourself out there. My recent new hire that I brought on board, he wants to go for a CCI route switch, and he's asking me, what was your experience going through the program? What worked for you learning? What worked for you on figuring out how to overcome that challenge that is the lab and the fear of the lab, quite frankly, before even sitting down in there. Sam knows that too from his experiences on it. And the big thing is blogging. It's putting yourself out there. Your solution that you blog about might not be right, but what that's going to do is that's going to have people come up and start commenting on you. And then you're going to start meeting people. Then you're going to start meeting other people. Jen and Sam and I, we all met each other at the PVTs and through Twitter. I mean, Jen and I were talking on Twitter, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh, hey, you're at Cisco Live? Well, let's get together and start meeting. And now, Sam, all of us, we constantly talking on the phone about solutions and issues, and George and I talking about ICE lately for our deployments. It's your relationships that you build are very important to being successful in this business. We're not going to hate you. We're not
There's one
going
of us at the table who wouldn't mentor anyone who asked.
Yeah.
Sure.
Exactly. I
Answer
completely
questions,
agree.
whatever questions they have.
Now, if you want me to configure your network via email, no.
We'll mentor you.
There's a difference.
And
Yes,
I like your idea about blogging. I think if you're gonna learn, document your learning process. One, it's a great way to learn. It's a great
Yes.
way for yourself to document that you learned it. Two, you're sharing it with others. And when you look at your blogs, you search for other people's blogs and you learn between them. So starting your own blog is free, easy, and put yourself out there.
And you
Yeah.
come across George's every time.
Yeah, exactly. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to various
Yeah.
members of across the entire tech field day gamut, all of the different peoples. I've come across their blogs and searching, and it's just like, wait a minute,
I know that.
I know that person.
Let me
now.
call them and ask them.
The best is when you have your own issue and you blog it,
And you
or
find
you find your own.
you find out, oh, I actually answered that. Okay.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that I hear a lot is people want their blog to be like fabulous, pristine, wonderful, useful content. But honestly, the best bloggers, like I remember Jason Bakke in the VMware space told me this. He started his blog just as a notebook, just to record what he was doing that day, and that's how it grew into being a useful blog. You know, the same. All these people started that way.
Yep.
You know,
My
not
fav-
me though. Everything I write is fabulous, but other people started as notebooks.
I would add an additional way of getting information and learning stuff about there. The CWNP forums are really, really good, both for being able to put questions up and get feedback on basic RF questions. It's not simply about their certifications, but they have a lot of other useful information.
Well, you look at
Well,
old
it-
posts on there, and you see posts from GT. You see of Marcus Burton. You see
Yeah.
some of the biggest well-known names in Wi-Fi, and posts from 2007 where they're asking the same question you're asking.
Yeah, and if you're entrenched in a single vendor,
Go
vendor
visit theirs.
communities
Vendor
are the
communities. You bet.
biggest success story. Just look at George and how active he is on the CSE forums for Cisco. He's always over there helping people. He's looking for answers for his own issues at times too, and then he's posting up solutions. He comes across a bug. He's helping people out. You need to get involved. You need to put the effort forward. It doesn't matter what you want to do. Just you need to put effort out to be successful. That's the number one.
Let me ask one more thing, and then we can wrap this up. So somebody's new, they've figured out, they've learned a little bit about Wi-Fi, they want to get a job. What type of jobs are there? So who can they work for in the industry?
Who can't they work for?
Well, can I say one thing? Please don't oversell yourself. You know,
Yes.
I had a really impressive resume in front of me one day. Sit the guy down and just ask him what a DB was, and he squirmed in his pants. Right? He's like, oh, he couldn't even answer the simple things.
Yeah.
You know, be true about what you know.
Know what you know, yeah.
When you're looking at starting out, we all started out in the not so glamorous side of
There's
wireless.
not usually specifically
Site
wireless jobs to
surveys.
start out with. It's usually something that's thrown over the fence
Yeah.
that somebody else doesn't want to deal with.
Well, and there's partners, there's enterprise, there's manufacturers, there's a lot of
customers.
different customers.
Help desk.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
bet.
that's
Well,
what I'm
Enterprise
not
space,
usually
right, yeah.
specifically a wireless job at the customer location, because I
The-
did a little bit of everything
Well,
starting
well,
out.
how many people here started off in wireless?
Well, it didn't take long.
Nobody?
Kind of. Yeah, I started site survey. You know, as the grunt guy,
Yeah.
banging on walls before we had, the
Air
nice.
checks. And
Yeah.
stuff. I think that's important. Is everybody's always talking about how do you get started in technology. I mean, I started at help desk. I've done web programming. I've done server admin, network admin, storage admin. Stephen and I were talking about that last night. He was very surprised I was EMC certified at one point in my life. If you're going into wireless, chances are you've probably gone through some of the other technologies as well, and it really helps you if you have a background of something else. It doesn't matter what it is because we all use it. Security with BYOD initiatives and having to learn about profiling and control your access through radius servers and other means. That security background comes into play. Now that we're virtualizing everything, controllers, management platforms, now those of you that have VMware experience, that's huge because now you can help it because from a partner standpoint, the more ways that I can put my tentacles into different groups, it's an upsell. It's a benefit. From the customer standpoint, if I can assist them more, they're going to look at it as, okay, this is a trusted advisor that I can bring in and I can actually trust what they're saying. I don't necessarily have to go and Google that afterwards. Are they full of it or are they correct?
So the point being is it doesn't matter what you're doing today, right? I used to write SQL reports. Well, it has nothing to do with really much of anything. And there are still things that are relevant today in the work that I do now that I can still rely on some of that legacy experience with. It doesn't matter what you're doing today. If you have an interest for it, go grab some free stuff and start looking and start talking to people.
I think you have to be really passionate or devoted by wireless. If I see my background, when I visited my sister in the US, I went to Barnes & Noble and bought my first wireless book with CWMP, and I thought, that's the track I want to go into. And I'm really passionate and devoted, and still I am. And
I think we all found that. But I think just to end the recap is, you need route switch. So if you, CCNA, I don't care if you pass the test,
Yeah.
but if you have that low level of knowledge, go ahead and pass the test. CWTS is the wimpy
CWTS,
one. Anyone
yeah.
can get that with just reading the book.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it's lifetime.
yeah, it's not for CWNA, again, I don't care if you pass the test, but if you have the knowledge, you should be able to pass the test. Use the test as a, and if you need at least that minimum to get in the game. That's the ante to play.
Yep.
And then there's survey experience, database experience, other things you can add to it. But if you want to get started, you know, and I don't care if it's Cisco CCNA, but that level of IP, switching, routing,
The
networks.
JCNA, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good.
I think
You're
also
welcome.
that you have also to be open-minded for multi-vendor thinking.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
you
more
bet.
than Cisco, but
Well, one, if you look at this audience, how many of you have worked for Juniper your entire career?
We're always moving around.
Who's all worked for Cisco?
No, it's very true. Is that RF is RF at its fundamentals. We've all said it that God, I really wish that vendor X would do what vendor Y had in a feature set. And Keith, you tweeted it already today. Is wish we could take the best of everybody and create one company. That's not going to happen, but we're going to get as close as we can to it. But you just got to be open. You got to be able to be willing to look at something else and say that might be the right solution.
I think the other thing that's interesting about wireless as a field to get into is that it's not just about the route switch, the wireless, the actual network layer. It's actually also a conversation about how does it integrate into other things.
Business analytics.
How does it work with all of those other things in an environment? And it's a glue. It puts, and having knowledge in other areas, you're always going to be able to use that knowledge if you want to get into the wireless field.
What about soft skills? You want to talk about the soft skills you're looking for when you go to hire someone?
Soft skills are very important because so much of our stuff is customer heavy. If we're walking around a hospital, you need to present yourself a certain way. You need to be careful about walking into patient care rooms. If Jen and I have talked about this a few times, hospice floors. You've got to have a personal, soft skills are very, very key. You got to be willing to work with nurses. Heck, I've trained OBGYN nurses before labor delivery to do my site survey for because I'm not walking into those rooms. But we need to have wireless in there. It's very important that the soft skills are there. You want me to cut the cord?
We have dealt with that.
They should be wireless babies now.
Oh boy, we've got a wireless joke.
Keith, you're right. Soft skills, it's very important.
But
you can't
writing
really develop
reports, communicating with your
Expressing
boss.
yourself
I mean,
verbally,
you're
emails,
talking both
communication.
directions,
Oh, yes.
both up and down when you're where we are.
And sometimes they may not have it, but that's not to say that we're not going to have a role for you in a wireless.
A lot of those skills develop through experience
Yeah,
as well.
exactly.
It's,
Yeah.
if you, some people either have them or they don't, but other people can develop
Oh
them.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, how many of you were nervous your first site survey when you're walking around and it's just like, don't talk to me, I'm trying to do a
My
site
first
survey.
On
Visio
the-
diagram looks like I drew it by hand with crayon.
It doesn't matter how many. I think out of every part in wireless, I've read Bruce's book and I've read so much on site surveying or had before I'd done a survey, and the amount you learn in that first. It doesn't matter. There's so much practical and there's so many little bits and pieces.
And every job
you
site's
can only
different.
you will just learn by doing a few of them.
Yeah.
And you don't even need to go
Few.
buy a book. There's plenty of material for free. I mean,
Yeah.
the first edition CWAP is free for
Yeah,
download.
yeah.
And it's like there's more in there than...
Plenty of blogs on.
Oh my
It's
Lord.
still
relevant.
that existed when we
Now,
were starting.
No,
on the
of
flip
course.
side, professional tools, I think
'Cause we're
if
old.
you're going to be a professional in this industry, there's some, tools that won't give you what you
Are
need.
you saying I can't use NetStumbler and list it as an experience on my resume?
I have seen that many times. And they're not cheap, but at some point you need to transition from being
At some
just a
point.
net stumbler guy to,
Right.
I've got some real tools I can
Right.
do real
Yeah.
work.
Well, you also have to transition from being a single client mindset. I'm an Apple guy. That's all I do is Apple. And there are people that, you know, when it's time to troubleshoot a Windows machine, or a Windows client, or an Android client,
And they don't know
or
how.
anything that's out of their comfort zone.
Yep.
So, I mean, if you're gonna be doing wireless, you have to have a big view of everything that's gonna show up in your environment, and that's a leap for some people. It's not just Apple to Windows, it's usually the other way. I mean, Apple's, you know, if I don't do it, I don't do it. And, you know, it almost seems like almost everything we've talked about, you have to really just kind of open your mind a little bit and, you know, see a big picture.
That seems like the summary, really. I mean, you know, so if people are interested in getting into the field, it's a great field to get into. The summary is pretty much that: open your eyes, jump in, try something, you know, get yourself any kind of access point, start looking at it, start using these tools, you know, to look at the packets and figure out how these things are working, and you know, get some education, download some free books, think about some certifications, and pretty soon you'll be ready to start walking around hospitals in the middle of the
There's
night.
lots and
Lots
lots
of
of work.
work, yeah.
Yes.
There's so much work
A lot
to
of
do.
people don't want to do it once they realize how much walking is involved in the whole site survey process, because it takes a while.
Segway.
for
Or you get a segue.
Yeah, you get a segue. I'm still jealous of Keith and his segue. One of these days, I'm gonna have to make it out there and watch you do a survey on it.
Do it yourself. You come out. Show up and say,
Sweet, I'm hired. See, I got a job already.
All right, so thank you very much, you guys, for talking about this.